I will never forget the week my girlfriend, Catherine, and I decided to book an Airbnb in a quaint old town in Vermont to escape the city noise. Honestly, when we first arrived, everything seemed perfectly normal. It was a two-story wooden house with a small front garden and vintage-style windows. We arrived around 6 p.m. The host, Mark, was there to greet us. He was a middle-aged man, soft-spoken, and very hospitable. He showed us the ground floor, where our bedroom, kitchen, and living area were located. He mentioned that he lived in a small cabin at the back of the property, so we could just message him if we needed anything. Around 11:30 p.m., we were exhausted and getting ready for bed. Suddenly, we heard noises coming from the floor above. It sounded like someone was walking very cautiously across the wooden floorboards. Catherine looked at me and asked, "Didn't Mark say the upstairs wasn't in use?" I nodded. Mark had been very clear that the top floor was closed off for renovations. At first, I tried to convince myself it was just mice or the old wood settling, but then the footsteps stopped and started again. It was unmistakably a human gait. I immediately texted Mark and asked if he was upstairs fixing something. His reply came instantly. "No, I'm in my cabin and no one is upstairs. I locked that door myself." Reading Mark's reply made my blood run cold. I told Catherine to stay put and headed toward the stairs. When I reached the top, I saw a single large room with a door secured by a heavy external padlock. I pressed my ear against the wood. Total silence, as if someone was inside holding their breath. I knocked, but there was no response. I went back downstairs and reassured Catherine it was probably just the wind. But at 2:45 a.m., I woke up again. This time, it wasn't just walking. It sounded like something heavy was being dragged across the floor. Catherine was genuinely terrified now. We decided to call Mark and check the upstairs ourselves. Mark arrived in 5 minutes with a flashlight, looking just as concerned as we were. He unlocked the padlock and the three of us stepped inside. The room was empty. There was just an old bed, some broken furniture, and a large wardrobe. Mark checked the windows. They were all locked from the inside. He laughed nervously and said, "See, no one here. Just the house settling, I guess." We went back down, but sleep was impossible for me. If no one was up there, how were those sounds so distinct? Around 5 a.m., as the first light of dawn broke, I went back up. This time, I was alone. I began to inspect the room meticulously. I checked under the bed, opened the wardrobe. Everything looked the same as last night. But as I was about to leave, I noticed a small metallic shard on the floor. It looked like the broken tip of a key. I thought it might be Mark's, but then I noticed strange scuff marks on the wall behind the wardrobe. I used all my strength to shove the heavy furniture aside. Behind the wardrobe was a small, hidden door, disguised so skillfully with wallpaper that you'd miss it at first glance. I pushed it and it creaked open. Inside was a narrow crawl space that ran behind the kitchen wall and led directly to the back of our bedroom closet. It was a secret passageway that allowed someone to move through the house completely unseen. Inside the crawl space, there was an old mattress and several wrappers of fresh food. But the most terrifying discovery was my small camera bag, which I had forgotten in the living room the night before. This meant someone had come downstairs while we were there, right under our noses, and taken my belongings back to their lair. I yelled for Catherine, and we scrambled to pack our things. When we showed the passage to Mark, he was absolutely shock-shelled. He called the police immediately. Upon searching the hidden space, the police found a bag containing several IDs and a diary. The diary belonged to a man named Adam, who had been living secretly in that house for months, right alongside Mark and various guests. The police explained that Adam was a local who made a habit of frogging, living in houses clandestinely. He was an expert. He would note the guests' sleep schedules and then emerge to eat their leftovers or use their things while they slept. He had built the secret passageway himself because he had worked as a laborer during the house's original renovation. We left that Airbnb right then and there.
Mark gave us a full refund and was so shaken that he decided to close the house indefinitely. We were silent the whole way home. Even now, my body shudders thinking that while we were sleeping, someone was standing right above us, or perhaps right behind our closet door, watching us. We made it out safely, but that incident destroyed my trust in Airbnbs forever. Now, whenever I enter a new room, the first thing I do is check behind the wardrobes and tap on the walls to make sure there isn't another atom hiding there.
This happened last October when I went hiking alone in a remote area of Pennsylvania. I had booked a small wooden cabin right by a lake. The host, Gary, seemed like a very decent and helpful guy at first. I arrived around 5 p.m. and Gary came over in person to hand me the keys. He gave me a warm welcome and went over every detail of the house. He was about 50 years old, neatly dressed, with an unnervingly wide smile that never seemed to leave his face. As he left, he said, "If you need even the slightest thing, just shoot me a message. I'm not far away." I hadn't even unpacked my bags when his first message arrived at 6:15 p.m. "Hope you like the room. Do you enjoy coffee?" I thanked him and said everything was fine, but over the next 2 hours, 8 more messages followed. He asked about the weather, what I was eating for dinner, and even started sending photos of menus from local spots. At 9:30 p.m., another message popped up. "It's very dark outside. You locked the door from the inside, right? Strangers sometimes wander around here." This one made me uneasy. He was being overprotective in a way that felt intrusive. I gave him a curt reply saying everything was locked and I was heading to bed. I was lying in the bedroom reading a book when I suddenly heard something. Footsteps on the porch. Since it was an old wooden house, the sound was unmistakable. I froze, holding my breath. At 11:45 p.m., I heard the door handle of my bedroom begin to move. It was turning slowly, almost silently downward. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I gathered my courage and flicked off the bedside lamp. I pulled the blanket over me and positioned myself to look like I was fast asleep. The handle rattled again. It felt like whoever was outside was checking to see if I had engaged the deadbolt. The person stood there for about 5 minutes. I saw a faint beam from a flashlight bleeding through the crack under the door, sweeping across the floor. I squinted my eyes just enough to see. That light was scanning the entire room. Then, suddenly, the light vanished and the footsteps receded into the distance. I stayed awake all night, clutching my hiking knife, but no one returned. The next morning at 8 a.m., I packed my bags to leave. I texted Gary saying an emergency had come up and I was leaving the key on the table. When I walked out, Gary was standing by his car, wearing that same eerie smile. He walked toward me and asked, "Leaving so soon? Did you sleep well?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "No, someone was trying to open my bedroom door last night." Gary's expression shifted for a split second. Then he casually pulled a ring of keys from his pocket. "Oh, that was probably me. I have an extra master key. I was just checking to make sure you hadn't left a window open. It gets cold here at night." I felt a surge of anger mixed with pure terror. He had tried to enter my room while he knew I was sleeping inside. I didn't say another word. I just started my car and sped away.
Later, when I checked the reviews more carefully, I found that he had done this to several solo travelers before, but they had always brushed it off as him being overly caring. Gary wasn't a typical criminal, but his habit of silently opening doors with a master key will never leave my mind. Now, whenever I stay in a hotel or an Airbnb, I always wedge a chair under the door handle because a key is useless if the door won't budge.
The three of us, Jack, Liam, and I, had been planning a getaway to the North Carolina mountains for months. We finally found a vintage, rustic Airbnb tucked deep in the heart of the woods. We arrived around 2 p.m. The host, Stephen, wasn't there. He had left the key in a lockbox for us. The cabin looked exactly like the photos: log walls, a massive stone fireplace, and cozy sofas. We dropped our bags and went out to explore. When we returned that evening, Liam went to the bathroom to wash up, and that's when he saw it for the first time. Right next to the bathroom mirror, embedded in the wooden frame, was a tiny pinhole. He called us over, but Jack just laughed it off. "Man, it's old wood. Knots and holes are normal. Stop turning everything into a spy movie." We took his word for it and ignored it. Around 10:30 p.m., as we were hanging out in the living room, Jack caught something out of the corner of his eye. It was pitch black outside, but at the start of the cabin's long driveway, a car was parked with its dim parking lights on. That car hadn't been there when we arrived. We figured someone was just lost, but 30 minutes later, it was still there, completely stationary. Anxiety began to creep in. Liam grabbed a pair of binoculars and peered through the dark. "Someone is sitting inside," he whispered. "They're just staring at our window." We flicked off the lights so they couldn't see us, but the car didn't budge. It felt like they were waiting for something. My mind raced back to that pinhole in the bathroom. I grabbed a flashlight, went back into the bathroom, and shined the light directly into the hole. What I saw made my hair stand on end. There was a tiny glass reflection behind the wood. It wasn't a natural knot, it was a camera lens. When I told Jack and Liam, we decided to search the entire cabin immediately. We checked everything that looked even slightly suspicious. We found tiny wireless cameras hidden inside the living room clock, under the kitchen shelves, and even inside the bedroom smoke detector. This wasn't just a random camera, it was a complete surveillance network. We were terrified. We realized that if we tried to leave, the person in the car might attack us. "Before we call the police, we need to see where these wires lead," Liam insisted. In the kitchen pantry, we found a small utility box where all the wires disappeared into the wall. Jack pried back a loose wall panel to reveal a monitor that was still powered on. The monitor was running 4 different live feeds: the bathroom, the bedroom, and the very spot where we were currently standing. But the 4th angle was the most chilling. It was a view of the exterior. In the footage, we could clearly see the car in the driveway, and inside, the driver was looking at his phone, watching the exact same live feeds we were. The glow of the phone illuminated his face. It was Stephen, our host. He was sitting there, watching us in real time as we discovered his secret. The moment he realized we had found the monitor, he started the engine and began speeding toward the cabin. We knew there was no time to think. We grabbed our essentials, bolted out the back door, and sprinted toward our car. Stephen's car screeched to a halt in front of the cabin just as Jack slammed our car into reverse. We tore out of there at full speed. In the rearview mirror, I saw him step out of his vehicle, just standing there, watching us disappear. He was holding a tablet, likely still watching the feed of his now empty cabin.
we spent the rest of the night in a distant highway motel. At dawn, we reported everything to Airbnb, providing the location and details of the footage. We later found out that Stephen had specifically designed the cabin for this purpose and had been recording the private lives of guests for months. What was supposed to be a peaceful vacation became a living nightmare. To this day, whenever I stay somewhere new, the first thing I do is check the bathroom mirrors and every tiny hole in the walls. You never truly know who might be watching behind the wood.